They told you the world was supposed to end in 2012. December 21st, the winter solstice, the day the ancient Mayan calendar supposedly ran out. Do you remember? The movies, the documentaries, the panic, people building bunkers, websites counting down the seconds, an entire industry of fear built around a single date carved into stone thousands of years ago by a civilization most people couldn't find on a map. And then, nothing happened. December 22nd arrived. The sun rose. People went to work. The apocalypse industry quietly packed up and moved on to the next prediction. And the world learned a lesson. The Maya were wrong. Except they weren't. Welcome to our world, our stories. And tonight, we're going to correct one of the biggest misunderstandings of the modern age. Because here's what nobody told you. The Maya never predicted the end of the world in 2012. Not once, not ever. That date, December 2012, wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The start of a new cycle. A transition period that the Maya believed would last decades. And according to their calculations, we are now in the middle of it. Right now, the Maya didn't predict an apocalypse. They predicted a transformation, a period of chaos, upheaval, and rebirth that would unfold slowly, not in a single day, but over 20 years. And they weren't alone. 500 miles to the north, in the heart of what is now Mexico City, another civilization was carving its own prophecies into stone. The Aztecs. They called our current age the fifth sun, and they were very specific about how it would end. Not with fire, not with flood, with movement, with earthquakes, with the earth itself turning against humanity. Tonight, we're going to do something that should have been done years ago. We're going to look at what the Maya and Aztecs actually predicted, not the Hollywood version, but the real prophecies translated from the original sources. And what we'll find is unsettling. Because these two civilizations, separated by centuries and hundreds of miles, saw the same future, a future that looks remarkably like our present. The people of time. To understand Mayan prophecy, you first have to understand who the Maya were, and more importantly, what they were obsessed with: time. The Maya didn't just track time. They worshipped it, they feared it, they built their entire civilization around understanding it. While medieval Europeans were still debating whether the earth was flat, Mayan astronomers had calculated the length of the solar year to within 30 seconds of modern measurements. They tracked the cycles of Venus with 99.99% accuracy. They predicted eclipses centuries in advance. Without telescopes, without computers, without any of the tools we consider essential, just observation, mathematics, and patience measured in generations. This wasn't primitive superstition. This was science. Rigorous, mathematical, obsessive science, all dedicated to one purpose: understanding the patterns of time. Why? Because the Maya believed something that sounds strange to modern ears, but made perfect sense to them. They believed time was circular, not linear, not a straight line from past to future, but a wheel, a spiral, a series of cycles that repeated, not exactly, but rhyming. The same patterns, the same energies returning again and again, like seasons, like the phases of the moon, like breath. And if you could understand those cycles, you could see what was coming. This is why the Maya developed not one calendar, but over 17 different interlocking calendar systems, each tracking a different cycle, each revealing a different pattern. The Tzolk'in, 260 days, the sacred calendar of ceremony and divination. The Harb, 365 days, the agricultural calendar of seasons and harvests. The calendar round, 52 years, the great cycle after which the Tzolk'in and Harb aligned again. And then there was the long count, the calendar that would make the Maya famous and infamous, thousands of years after they carved it into stone. The long count. The long count was different from all the other calendars. It wasn't designed to track seasons or ceremonies. It was designed to track history, to place events within a framework so vast that it could contain the entire story of human civilization. It worked like an odometer, a cosmic odometer, measuring days since a mythological starting point, August 11th, 3114 BCE, the date the Maya believed the current world was created. The system used 5 positions, each representing a different unit of time. Kin, 1 day. Winal, 20 days. Tun, 360 days. Roughly 1 year. Katun, 7,200 days. Roughly 20 years. Baktun, 144,000 days. Roughly 400 years. And here's where it gets interesting. The Maya believed that a complete great cycle of the long count consisted of 13 biaktuns. That's approximately 5,125 years. Do the math. Start from August 11th, 3114 BCA. Add 5,125 years. You land on December 21st, 2012. That's it. That's where the end of the world prediction came from, the completion of the 13th Baktun, the end of a great cycle. But here's what everyone missed. The Maya never said the world would end when this cycle completed. Just like your car's odometer doesn't explode when it reaches 100,000 miles. It just rolls over, starts again. December 21st, 2012 wasn't the end of anything. It was 13 becoming 14.0, the beginning of a new great cycle. So why did we all think the world was ending? The 2012 apocalypse was a modern invention. It started in the 1970s and 80s with a handful of New Age authors who took the long count completion date and layered their own interpretations on top. Jose Arguelles's book, The Mayan Factor, in 1987 was particularly influential. It connected 2012 to everything from extraterrestrials to spiritual transformation to galactic alignments. Then Hollywood got involved. Roland Emmerich's disaster film 2012, History Channel specials with dramatic music and CGI destruction, countdown websites, books, documentaries, a billion-dollar industry of fear. And in all that noise, the actual Mayan voice was completely drowned out. Because when you talk to modern Maya, and there are still 6 million of them living today in Guatemala, Mexico, Belize, and Honduras, they'll tell you something very different. The end of a cycle is not a catastrophe. It's a transition. Think of it like New Year's Eve. December 31st isn't the end of time. It's a threshold, a moment of reflection, of endings and beginnings. Some things die with the old year, some things are born with the new, but the transition isn't instant. It doesn't happen at midnight and then it's done. The Maya understood this. They spoke of a transition period surrounding the cycle change, a period where the energy of the old cycle fades and the energy of the new cycle gradually takes hold. Contemporary Mayan daykeepers, the spiritual leaders who still maintain the ancient calendar traditions, say that this transition period lasts approximately 20 years. From 2012 to 2032, which means we are not after the prophecy, we are inside it. Right now, in the turbulent middle. Now let's look at actual Mayan prophecies. Not calendar mathematics, but prophecies, specific predictions about the future written down by Mayan priests. The most important source is a collection of texts called the Chilam Balam. Chilam means prophet or spokesman. Balam means jaguar, the books of the jaguar priest. These texts were written in the Yucatec Mayan language using the European alphabet introduced by Spanish missionaries. They date from the 16th through 18th centuries, after the conquest, but they contain material much older. Prophecies passed down orally for generations, finally committed to paper before they could be lost forever. Several books of Chilam Balam survive, named after the towns where they were found. Chumayel, Tizimin, Mani, Kawa. Each contains history, mythology, medical knowledge, and prophecy. The prophetic sections are organized around the Khatun cycle, that 20-year period I mentioned earlier. Each Khatun was associated with specific energies, specific tendencies, specific warnings, and the prophecies for the Khatun we're living through right now are striking. We are currently in Khatun 4 Ahau. It began in 2012 and runs until approximately 2032. Let me read you what the Chilam Balam of Chumayel says about this period. These are the words of the Jaguar priests, translated by scholar Ralph Roys. The Quetzal shall come, the green bird shall come, blood vomit shall come, Kukulkan shall come. Let me explain. The Quetzal is the sacred bird of Mesoamerica. Brilliant green feathers that shimmer like emeralds, associated with royalty, divinity, and freedom. Its arrival signals a moment of profound spiritual significance. Blood vomit almost certainly refers to epidemic disease, hemorrhagic fevers, plagues. The Maya had seen such things before, and their prophecies often echo across cycles, applying to multiple eras. And Kukulkan is the Mayan name for a god you may know by his Aztec name, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, one of the most important deities in all of Mesoamerican religion. His return is one of the most persistent prophecies in these traditions. We'll return to him later. The Chilambalam continues, "It is the time of the speaking Lord. There shall be sorrow among the years." Sorrow among the years, a period of grief stretching across time. The face of the sun shall be covered. Eclipses, climate events, smoke from fires darkening the sky. Then the sky shall be divided. What does that mean? A sky divided? Perhaps you've seen it. Perhaps you've looked up recently and noticed something has changed. The weather patterns that no longer behave as they should. The seasons that have lost their rhythm. Perhaps the sky is already dividing. The prophecy continues. In this Khatun, there shall be scarcity of corn and squash. Great shall be the famine. Food scarcity, agricultural collapse, crops failing. The government shall be paralyzed. There shall be no agreement among the lords. The head chiefs shall be scattered. Political chaos. Leadership failures, those in power unable to act, unable to agree, scattered and ineffective. I want you to think about these words. They were written centuries ago, copied from oral traditions even older, describing a period that the Maya calculated would arrive in our time. Now look around you. Does any of this sound familiar? The Chilam Balam isn't the only source of Mayan prophecy. We also have the codices, the actual books created by the Maya before the conquest. Only 4 survive. The Spanish priests burned the rest, believing them to be works of the devil. The most important for our purposes is the Dresden Codex, named after the German city where it now resides. It's a folding screen book made of fig bark paper, covered in hieroglyphs and illustrations, dating to sometime between the 11th and 12th centuries. Most of the Dresden Codex contains astronomical tables, Venus cycles, eclipse predictions, the mathematical obsession of the Maya laid out in columns of dots and bars. But there's one page that has haunted researchers for generations. Page 74. It shows a catastrophic flood. At the top, a great serpent stretches across the sky. From its mouth, water pours down upon the world. Not rain, a deluge, a torrent. The heavens themselves vomiting destruction. Below the serpent, a goddess stands. She's usually identified as Ixchel, goddess of storms, of the moon, of destruction and creation. In her hands she holds a jar. From the jar, more water flows, endless water. And below them both the world drowns. Cities submerged, people overwhelmed, everything the previous age built, swallowed by the waters. Some scholars say this is simply mythology, a depiction of the flood that destroyed the previous world age in the Mayan creation story, nothing more than a religious illustration. But others point out something important. The Dresden Codex is fundamentally a book of predictions. Everything else in it is about the future. Astronomical events that hadn't happened yet when the book was created. Why would this one page be different? Why would the Maya place an image of world-destroying floods in their book of prophecy unless they meant it as prophecy? And here's what unsettles me most. This image, water from the sky, the heavens as weapon, civilization drowned, appears in prophecies across the world. Nostradamus wrote of great floods. Edgar Cayce predicted coastlines would be altered by rising waters. Mother Shipton said the seas would rise. Baba Vanga described floods consuming cities. Different prophets, different centuries, different continents, the same vision. There's one more Mayan concept I need to share before we move to the Aztecs. The 9 Lords of the Night. In Mayan, Polon Yocte Ku. These are 9 deities who govern the underworld. They represent the forces of change, transformation, death, and rebirth. They're associated with war, sacrifice, and the transitions between world ages. They are not evil, exactly, but they are dangerous. Powers that reshape reality. Forces that destroy the old to make way for the new. And here's why they matter to us. There's an ancient inscription at a site called Tortuguero. It's one of the only surviving ancient Mayan references to the 2012 date. Carved in stone centuries before the modern hysteria, the inscription is damaged. Parts are broken and illegible, but scholars have reconstructed what remains. The 13th Baktun will be finished. It will happen, darkness, and the descent of Bolon Yocte Ku to the... And then the stone is broken. We don't know how the sentence ends, but we know what it says. The descent of Bolon Yocte Ku. The 9 lords descending, not the end of the world, but the arrival of transformative forces, powers from below rising into the world above. The Maya believed that during transition periods, the boundary between worlds grows thin. What was hidden becomes visible. What was below comes above. What was buried rises to the surface. We're in that period now. The 9 lords are descending. What's being revealed? Look at the secrets being exposed. The hidden systems becoming visible. The powers that operated in darkness now dragged into light. Perhaps the Maya were more accurate than we ever imagined. The Aztecs, children of the 5th sun. 500 miles northwest of the Mayan heartland, another civilization was building pyramids and studying stars. The Aztecs, or more accurately, the Mexica. Aztec was a term applied later by historians. They called themselves the Mexica, and they built their empire on an island in the middle of a lake. They called their capital Tenochtitlan. Today we call it Mexico City. The Aztecs weren't as ancient as the Maya. Their empire rose in the 14th century and fell in 1521 when Hernan Cortés arrived with his conquistadors. A civilization that lasted barely 200 years. But the Aztecs drew on traditions much older than themselves, beliefs inherited from the Toltecs, the Olmecs, and civilizations whose names have been forgotten. A cosmology with roots stretching back thousands of years. And the most important element of that cosmology, for our purposes tonight, is the legend of the 5 suns. According to Aztec belief, the world has been created and destroyed 4 times before our current age. Each creation is called a sun. Each sun had its own humanity, its own gods, its own characteristics, and each sun ended in catastrophe. Let me take you through them. The first sun was called Nahui Ocelotl. For Jaguar, this world was ruled by Tezcatlipoca, the god of night and shadow, the smoking mirror, a deity of power, conflict, and transformation. The people of the first sun were giants, massive beings who walked the young earth. How did this world end? Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, Tezcatlipoca's eternal rival, struck him from the sky with a great club. In his fury, Tezcatlipoca transformed into a monstrous jaguar, and he released all the jaguars of the world upon humanity. The giants were devoured, every last one. The first sun went dark. End of an age. The second sun was called Nahue Ehecatl, four wind. This world was ruled by Quetzalcoatl himself, a gentler age, some say, a time of wisdom and cultivation. How did it end? Tezcatlipoca took his revenge. He cast Quetzalcoatl down from the heavens, and the wind became a weapon. Catastrophic hurricanes swept the world, storms beyond anything we can imagine. The wind tore apart everything humanity had built. The survivors, to save themselves, transformed into monkeys. They clung to trees while the world was ripped apart around them. The second sun went dark. The third sun was called Nahue Quiahuitl, for rain. This world was ruled by Tlaloc, the god of rain and storms, a time of water, of agriculture, of growth. How did it end? Fire from the sky. Not water, fire. Quetzalcoatl, in his turn, brought destruction. Some versions describe volcanic eruptions. Others speak of something falling from the heavens. Fire raining down, burning everything. The survivors transformed into birds and flew above the flames. The third sun went dark. The fourth sun was called Nahui Atl, for water. This world was ruled by Xalcutlicue, the goddess of rivers, lakes, and oceans, Tlaloc's consort. How did it end? A great flood! The rains came and did not stop. The waters rose and did not recede. The entire world drowned beneath endless waves. The survivors transformed into fish, but one man and one woman, in some versions of the myth, survived inside a hollow log, a vessel that carried them through the deluge until the waters receded and they could begin again. Does this sound familiar? A global flood, survivors in a vessel, a humanity destroyed and reborn. This story appears in virtually every ancient culture on Earth. Sumerian, Hebrew, Greek, Hindu, Chinese, Native American, and Aztec. The fourth sun went dark, and now we come to our world. The fifth sun, Nahui Olin. For movement, for earthquake. This is the age you and I were born into, the sun that lights our sky, the world we think of as permanent and stable. But the Aztecs knew better. According to their mythology, the fifth sun was created at Teotihuacan, that magnificent pyramid complex northeast of Mexico City. You may have seen pictures: the Pyramid of the Sun, the Pyramid of the Moon, the Avenue of the Dead. After the fourth sun drowned, the world was in darkness. The gods gathered at Teotihuacan to create a new sun. But this time, the price was higher than ever before. Two gods volunteered to become the new sun: the proud and beautiful Tecuchistecatl, and the humble, sick, pox-scarred Nanahuatzin. A great fire was built. Tecuchistecatl approached the flames 4 times. 4 times he faltered. The heat was too intense, the sacrifice too great. Then Nanahuatzin stepped forward. Without hesitation, he threw himself into the fire. His body was consumed, and he rose again as the sun. Shamed by the lesser god's courage, Tecuchistecatl finally leaped into the flames as well. He rose as a second sun, equally bright. The gods couldn't allow 2 suns. They threw a rabbit at Tecuchistecatl's face, dimming his light. He became the moon. This is why the Aztecs saw a rabbit in the moon's surface, and this is why they believed the 5th sun was born from sacrifice. But there was a problem. The new sun hung in the sky and did not move. Nanahuatzin, now called Tonatiuh, demanded payment for his service. He had given everything: his life, his body, his existence. Now he demanded that other gods give as well. One by one, the gods sacrificed themselves, their blood flowed, and finally, with their life force as fuel, the sun began to move across the sky. This is the origin of Aztec human sacrifice. They believed the 5th sun required constant blood to keep moving. Without sacrifice, the sun would stop. Darkness would fall. The world would end. But even with sacrifice, every sun must end. The Aztecs were specific about how our age would conclude. The name tells us everything. Nahue Olin, for movement. Not jaguar like the first sun, not wind like the second, not fire from above like the third, not flood like the fourth movement. The Aztec prophecies describe it like this. There will be earthquakes, there will be movement, the world will shake itself apart. The earth becoming unreliable, the ground we stand on betraying us. But it's more than just seismic activity. The word Olin in Nahuatl, the Aztec language, carries multiple meanings. Movement, change. Transformation, instability. The fifth sun doesn't end in a single catastrophic moment. It ends in a period of increasing instability, the familiar world shifting, things we thought were permanent proving fragile, the ground, literal and metaphorical, shaking beneath our feet. Some scholars interpret this as earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, tectonic chaos, the ring of fire coming alive. Others see a broader meaning, social movement, political upheaval, economic instability, the foundations of civilization cracking. Perhaps it's both. Perhaps for movement describes a world where everything moves at once. Tectonic plates, political systems, social orders, the climate, all of it shifting, changing, refusing to stay stable. Does that sound like any time period you recognize? The Aztecs believed this ending was inevitable. Not a possibility, a certainty. Every sun had ended. The fifth sun would too. The only question was when. And there were those who believed they knew. Now we come to the most famous prophecy in all of Mesoamerican history, and the most misunderstood, the return of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, a god who appeared in one form or another across virtually every Mesoamerican civilization. The Maya called him Kukulkan. The Toltecs claimed him as their founder. The Aztecs inherited his legend and made it central to their religion. Quetzalcoatl is a strange god, a contradiction, a paradox. He is the union of opposites. Quetzal, the divine bird, creature of sky and heaven, symbol of freedom and spirit. Coatl, the serpent, creature of earth and underworld, symbol of matter and body. Together, the feathered serpent, spirit and matter united, heaven and earth joined. According to mythology, Quetzalcoatl was more than a god. He had once been a god-king, a ruler of the ancient Toltec city of Tollan. He was described as a bringer of knowledge, culture, and civilization. He taught humanity agriculture, writing, astronomy, the arts. He was associated with wind, with Venus as the morning star, with wisdom and learning. And unlike other Mesoamerican deities, Quetzalcoatl opposed human sacrifice. This made him unique. In a religious system built on blood offerings, Quetzalcoatl represented another way. He accepted butterflies and flowers, songs and incense, self-sacrifice through penance rather than the killing of others. The legends say he was tricked by his eternal rival, Tezcatlipoca. The smoking mirror deceived him, made him drunk, caused him to break his sacred vows in a night of shame. When Quetzalcoatl realized what he had done, he was consumed by guilt. He left Tollan, walked to the eastern sea. Some versions say he burned himself on a pyre and rose to become the morning star. Others say he sailed away on a raft made of serpents, but all versions agree on one thing. He promised to return. One day, from the east, across the sea, Quetzalcoatl would come back. And this prophecy nearly destroyed the Aztec Empire. In 1519, Hernán Cortés landed on the eastern coast of Mexico. 500 Spanish conquistadors, 16 horses, a handful of cannons against an empire of millions. And yet within 2 years that empire would fall. How? The answer involves disease, indigenous allies, Spanish brutality, political divisions within the Aztec world, and 100 other factors. But there's another element. a stranger element. Cortez came from the east. Across the sea, he arrived in a year called Se Acatl in the Aztec calendar. One read, a year sacred to Quetzalcoatl, a year when his return was particularly anticipated. The Spanish had pale skin, some had beards, characteristics that certain traditions associated with Quetzalcoatl. They came with impossible technology, animals no one had ever seen, weapons that killed with thunder. Were they gods? Were they the fulfillment of prophecy? The Aztec Emperor Moctezuma II received reports of these strangers and faced an impossible question. Is this him? Is this Quetzalcoatl returning? Historians debate how seriously Moctezuma believed this. Some argue that Cortez's Quetzalcoatl story was invented after the conquest, a way for the conquered to explain their defeat, a narrative imposed by the Spanish to justify their victory. Others believe Moctezuma genuinely wasn't certain, and that uncertainty paralyzed his response. Either way, the result was catastrophic. The Aztec response to the Spanish was fatally hesitant. There were moments when Cortez could have been crushed. He wasn't. Within 2 years, Tenochtitlan had fallen. The great city burned. The emperor murdered. Within a century, 90% of the indigenous population was dead, mostly from European diseases against which they had no immunity. The prophecy of Quetzalcoatl's return was fulfilled in the most terrible way imaginable. Or was it? Some indigenous scholars and spiritual leaders argue that Cortez was not the true fulfillment of the Quetzalcoatl prophecy. He was a false Quetzalcoatl, a deceiver, a trickster wearing the serpent's mask while serving the darkness of Tezcatlipoca. Think about it. What was Quetzalcoatl supposed to bring? Knowledge, enlightenment, civilization, an end to human sacrifice, the union of heaven and earth. What did Cortez bring? Enslavement, destruction, mass death, a different kind of sacrifice. Entire peoples offered up to the gods of gold and empire. The conquest brought the opposite of everything Quetzalcoatl represented, so perhaps the prophecy wasn't fulfilled in 1519. Perhaps it was interrupted, hijacked, a dark force wearing the mask of light. Perhaps the real return is yet to come. This interpretation persists in many indigenous communities today. The understanding that 1519 was not the prophecy fulfilled, but the prophecy perverted, a false dawn, and that the true return, the real awakening, is still approaching. Some say we're approaching it now. Before we leave the Aztecs, we need to talk about the Sunstone. You've seen it. Even if you don't know its name, you know its image, that massive circular carving, nearly 12 feet across, over 20 tons of stone, covered in concentric rings of symbols with a fierce face in the center. It's often called the Aztec calendar, though that's not quite accurate. It's more like a cosmological map, a symbolic representation of time, space, creation, destruction, and destiny, all carved into a single magnificent disc. The face in the center is usually identified as Tonatiuh, the sun god of the fifth sun. His tongue protrudes from his mouth. That tongue is a sacrificial knife. Around him, in the ring called Olin, movement, are symbols representing the 4 previous suns, the 4 previous worlds that were destroyed. The message is clear. We are surrounded by endings. Our world is built on the ruins of 4 previous attempts, 4 humanities that rose and fell, 4 suns that burned and went dark, and our sun, the 5th, will join them eventually. The outer rings contain day signs, solar symbols, fire serpents, divine imagery. The whole thing is a monument to the Aztec understanding of cosmic cycles. But there's a detail often overlooked. Tonatiuh's tongue, that sacrificial knife, protrudes from his mouth, demanding blood. Some interpret this as a reminder. The 5th sun requires sacrifice. Stop feeding it, and it dies. Others see something more ominous. The sun god's tongue is a knife. The source of light is also an instrument of death. The same power that gives life will eventually take it. The sunstone isn't just a record of the past, it's a warning about the future. The fifth sun will demand its sacrifice. Whether that sacrifice is blood, transformation, or something else entirely, remains to be seen. The convergence. When Maya met Aztec, we've examined Mayan prophecy, we've examined Aztec prophecy. Now let's put them together. These civilizations weren't isolated from each other. They existed in the same region for centuries. They traded, they fought, they exchanged ideas, goods, and beliefs. The Aztecs knew of the Maya. Mayan merchants traveled Aztec roads. Mayan religious concepts filtered into Aztec traditions. The feathered serpent god, Quetzalcoatl to the Aztecs, Kukulkan to the Maya, is the clearest example. Same deity, different names. So perhaps it shouldn't surprise us that their prophecies overlap. Both traditions describe time as cyclical, great ages that rise and fall. Both speak of previous worlds destroyed by various catastrophes. Both identify our current age as a transitional period, a time of ending and beginning. Both predict upheaval, floods, earthquakes, famine, social collapse. Both speak of a return, whether of Kukulkan descending or Quetzalcoatl rising. And both point to the period we're living through as the critical threshold. But the convergence doesn't stop with Mesoamerica. The pattern extends. In a previous video on this channel, we examined 5 prophets who lived across centuries and continents. Nostradamus from 16th century France, Baba Vanga from 20th century Bulgaria, Edgar Cayce from early 20th century America, Mother Shipton from 15th century England, Saint Malachy from 12th century Ireland. They knew nothing of Maya or Aztec traditions. They wrote in French, Bulgarian, English, and Latin, not Yucatec or Nahuatl. And yet, consider climate catastrophe. The Maya predicted famine and agricultural failure during Katun Forahau, our current period. The Aztecs described the fifth sun dying in a world of increasing instability. Nostradamus wrote of great floods, droughts, and burning from the sky. Edgar Cayce predicted that coastlines would be redrawn by rising waters. Mother Shipton said the seas would rise and the climate would become hot and cold and wet and dry. Baba Vanga spoke of natural disasters increasing in frequency and intensity. Consider political chaos. The Chilam Balam predicted that during this Katun, the government shall be paralyzed and the head chiefs shall be scattered. Nostradamus saw empires falling, leaders fleeing, nations divided against themselves. Baba Vanga spoke of Europe becoming empty, of great powers declining. Mother Shipton wrote of kingdoms collapsing, of leaders who betray their people. Consider spiritual crisis. The Maya spoke of Kukulkan returning, a profound spiritual transformation coming to humanity. The Aztecs awaited Quetzalcoatl, enlightenment or destruction, depending on how humanity receives him. St. Malachy's papal prophecy ends with the judgment of humanity itself. Edgar Cayce predicted a battle between light and darkness within sacred institutions. Consider something falling from the sky. The Maya's Dresden Codex shows destruction pouring from the heavens. The Aztec third sun was destroyed by fire from above. Nostradamus wrote of the great star that will burn for 7 days. Mother Shipton predicted a fiery dragon crossing the sky. Baba Vanga spoke of something falling from space. Consider the time frame. The Mayan transition period runs from 2012 to approximately 2032. Nostradamus's most troubling quatrains point to the 2020s. Baba Vanga made specific predictions for 2025 through 2028. Edgar Cayce's timeline culminates in this decade. 7 different prophetic traditions, across thousands of years, spanning continents with no contact between them, all pointing to the same window of time, all describing the same patterns. What are the odds? I want to be careful here. I'm not saying the world is definitely ending. I'm not trying to frighten you. I'm trying to show you something that I find genuinely strange. These prophecies don't just share predictions, they share a structure. Every tradition we've examined describes time as cyclical, not linear. Cycles of creation and destruction, ages that rise and fall. Every tradition places humanity at or near the end of a cycle. Every tradition describes the transition not as a single moment of catastrophe, but as a period of transformation, chaos, upheaval, and then renewal. And every tradition suggests that the outcome is not predetermined. Human choices matter. Consciousness matters. The transition can be navigated well or poorly. The Maya didn't just predict disaster. They developed rituals and ceremonies to help humanity pass through dangerous transitions. The Aztecs didn't just warn of the fifth sun's end. They believed human sacrifice, the offering of what is most precious, could sustain the sun and delay the ending. Even the European prophets embedded choices in their visions. A prophecy of warning implies that the warned can act. Otherwise, why warn? This isn't fatalism, it's a call to awareness. The prophecies don't say, sit back and watch the world end. They say, wake up, this is a threshold. What you do now matters.